All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Katherine. I'm a trust and estates attorney based in New York and California. And I wanted to bring on a client, now a friend of mine, who I've been working with since 2015. I looked up her file. And I thought if we did a little Q&A, it might help other people with their estate planning getting started or thinking about revisions. So um, my client friend's name is Bernie. She's in Southern California. She's a mom of two college-aged boys, and she has been a role model for other clients of mine for a long time. So Bernie, why don't you introduce yourself and give more expansion?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure. So my name is Bernie. I do have a 30-year career in animation, mostly in production, talent, and artist management. I am also a freelance writer, mostly ghost writing. I can only do that when I'm not currently engaged in other productions. Currently revamping a blog, which we can share here. And you touched on it, and I think this is relevant to this conversation. I've been divorced for 13 years. I have two college-age kids, and currently single. Where are the middle-aged single men at? Oh, sorry, wrong video.
We can go there. We can definitely go there.
Exactly. I've been working with you for a while, and I've had a very positive experience and happy to come on board here and share my experience.
So interesting. Now that Bernie went to the single route, Bernie and I started working together when she was married and I was married. And then I think I got a divorce first. And then did I? I think so. And then did I? Maybe one of us went through, I think I did first, and then you went through a divorce, and our kids are in similar age groups.
Oh.
So now we're going through the college discussions. And just to add to everyone, while Bernie and I started working together in 2015, I just want to look at my notes. After your divorce in 2019, you did the revisions. She was so good and called me and updated and did her own estate plan. And then when the boys were going to college, then we were able to do their healthcare and power of attorney for property, which I've spoke about this, that if you don't have it once your young adult children turn 18, you have no access to any of their financial or medical records. And sometimes you need to. So we went through that process, and your boys were so adult and wonderful. I got to talk to them, and they had really good questions. They definitely were not just like, oh, give me a document and I'll sign it. Like, we went through conversations and they had good questions. One of her sons paused for a moment, and then he thought about it, and he's like, yes, I'm going to sign this. So it worked out great. Yeah. So Bernie, wait, I just want to ask you to start off with, like, I know you worked with attorney prior to me, but what occurred that because you were young when you worked with your first attorney, you were probably newly married, and yeah. So what prompted you because a lot of people, almost 75% of Americans don't have estate plans. So what was it about that you knew you had to reach out to somebody?
Well, first of all, when I had my firstborn and he was 18 months, I bought this house. And I knew that it was important because I've heard so many stories about probate horrors and what happens if, God forbid, anything would happen to me, and what would that mean for the children and then things they would have to deal with. So it was really important. I would have to say that first experience, the first estate attorney or estate planning attorney I worked with, wasn't the best. It was very administrative. I just felt like I was being, checkbox and going through all of that. And so after my divorce was final, and I think it took a while because going through the divorce and everything else, and it's 2015, like when I started working together after my divorce was final a few years prior, I actually learned quite a bit from you in terms of like things that I wasn't even considering, because I had an estate plan or, a trust, but I like the will and all of those other things that you talked me through. It wasn't even on my radar. So that was really important. And honestly, it was for me I'm pretty organized. I work in production management, so pretty organized. And I want to make sure, at that point in time, it wasn't just about have, property and, homes and everything else. It was about, what happens, if and when I remarry and, and that person may have children and I just don't want to put my children in a position where, again, if the worst were to occur, that they have to deal with, situations of like, wait, why does, mom's spouse now have everything and what, that type of thing. I did not want that to be my legacy.
Yeah, and you bring up in that like one segment here, you brought up so many issues. So, finding an attorney that you can work with and have a relationship with, a good place for people to start would be asking friends, asking coworkers, trying to get referrals. But I'm curious, so when you met with this first attorney, because I find estate planning to be it's very relationship based. So I need to get to know my clients. And this is why I love having you on this Q&A too, because you've been such a good example of this. When I'm meeting with clients for the first time and I tell them, I want you to contact me as much as you want to. Send an email, send a text, send a phone call. Call me, let me know if there's any changes, if you're having a baby or your daughter's having a baby. These are always open for conversation. And even if we don't have to change your estate plan, I love hearing about all these life changes. So finding that estate planning attorney that is relationship based as opposed to transactional. But so when you met with this attorney, did he ask you any in-depth questions, or how did that process go for you? Was it mostly like you filled out paperwork, submitted it, and then you got an estate plan back?
It feels like it was a million years ago. That child that I had at the time is now 21.
Yeah,
So
that's a long time ago.
it's been a hot minute, but I just remember it being, like there's paperwork that I needed to fill out. And I think that was it. Like I had to fill out a bunch of paperwork first. And I remember 2 meetings. And then it was also like going into it was with, my husband and I at the time, going into this conference room. It was very like, even the conference room, I just, how you just have impressions, in memories. It was very impersonal. It felt very sterile. I just was like, okay, let me, let's just get through it. But again, at that point in time, I had no point of reference. It was like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. I'm supposed to be doing this, and what a drag. And, but I did it. So I felt good about that. But then it was night and day when you and I started working together. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to this than all of these things. And so it became a natural thing for me whenever there is a life change to contact you, just to even, go through any changes to see if there's any impact. And, I'm sure when the boys graduate from college, one or both, one and both, I'm going to be doing the same thing. It's like, and right now, our last conversation about like, do I start an LLC? Do I not? Because I'm considering going on my own. And, it's just having that conversation and ongoing dialogue and relationship. It's all about relationship for me. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
And also, well, thank you. But also, I think as an estate planning attorney now, it's so important for me to have a team behind me as well. So it's not just the client and the attorney. There's lots of clients that come to me that don't have a financial advisor, never even considered it, but are having a hard time managing their own funds, or having a business attorney, or like, I know you've emailed me, like, do you have this kind, like, can you do this? And I'll say, no, but I'll have an attorney for you. Let me give you a few referrals, and then you can choose whether to work with that person or not. But it's just kind of like a team, building this team, whether it's an accountant or a different type of attorney, just making sure that your client is fully covered. And there was something else that came to my head while you were speaking on all of this. Oh, so not thinking about it, not wanting to think about it, and then the difficult discussion. So one thing I realized, I've been practicing for over 20 years now. And what I've realized for married couples, often the estate planning process, going through it with an attorney that asks questions, is interactive. It's bumpy, no doubt. Like I've had clients get into fights in front of me, but once you get over that bump, it actually they become closer at the end of the process. And I think that, so I was thinking as you were speaking, like for you, what was the hardest part of the process? Like what was your biggest challenge after getting started? Like any one specific, was it answering the questions or gathering your financial information?
I think, well, gathering the financial, information, to me, again, I'm super organized. I have all that stuff dialed in. I think the most difficult, and I wouldn't even use the word difficult, I think it's more the most important part of the process is identifying my, what are they called?
Agents?
Agents. Yes.
Yeah, so like
I,
your trustee,
yeah.
executor, who would make healthcare decisions for you?
Yes.
That one's so hard. I find that very difficult for myself as well.
Yeah, that part in the beginning and even along the way was the hardest part because it also changed. When I was married, we had different agents. And then when I got divorced, the kids were older, in their teens. And so I had different agents. And I know that the next time I review this, I may change it also. But that's the hardest part. Again, hardest, but it's really the most important part, because you got to entrust the person that you're, the person, that you're identifying as agents for your.
Yeah. And it's tricky with the healthcare agency because, again, our kids are around the same age. I have one that's younger, but you start to think about whether your kids could be your agent. And they're still at that age where how much pressure do I want to put on them? And it's very individual. So, how much pressure do I want to put on them? If they're studying in college, do I want to put them in a position where they're pulled out of? Because a lot of people immediately, as soon as their kids turn 18, they're like, oh, my kids will be my agents. And we're like, okay, well, let's pause on that and talk about if they're in their studies, what if they're studying abroad, or what if they're in a demanding program? We wouldn't want them to get pulled out of that program and put in the difficult decisions of deciding what to do with mom or dad or any of their loved ones. But there does come a point where your adult child is old enough to make those decisions. So having those conversations and trying to determine what is the right age for you and your family and your adult children, if you should have them, that's challenging. That's really hard because we don't want to put our kids in a position where they have to give. They're just starting, right? They're just starting out in life. It's so exciting to watch it, but we wouldn't want to put them in that position.
One of the conversations that we had around this, it was a few years ago, which left a really big impact in this conversation about identifying, if it's your kids is, obviously I have two kids and they're 3 years apart. Do you identify one? Do you identify both? And if you identify one, is that going to create if there's differences in opinion between the kids, will that then affect their relationship? Or do you want one or both of your kids to carry that weight of like, I had to make a very difficult call? And like you said, I just remember thinking about that, like, oh, that's clearly not something I want to impose on them at such a young age or young adulthood, So I just remember like those type of conversations, were really important and impactful and help in my decision making.
Yeah. And then when you do meet the right person and you decide to either cohabitate with them or get married, then that opens up another conversation that we would discuss about how you plan your estate, how your partner would plan their estate as well. Often they're separate estates, and everybody wants to make sure that their children are taken care of, at least to a certain age, and then sometimes it transitions. So sometimes it's a newly second marriage or a third marriage, and we want to protect the children for the first marriage. But then it might transition again, that marriage may last 30, 40 years. And like I can speak, for example, for my mother. My mother's been remarried and we're older now. So should my mom predecease her husband, we don't want the money. We want to make sure he's taken care of. So now it's pivoting back towards their relationship. So that's why a relationship, right, is so important with your attorney, because life is so fluid. It's changing all the time. And we want to make sure we get those updates and don't keep the same estate plan from 20, 30 years ago when life circumstances change so much.
Yeah.